Bikur Cholim are visiting the sick, and as always, I have to give Rabbi Flug credit for putting this together. He's from Yeshiva University. So, in this class, we're going to discuss the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, of visiting the sick, and we're going to figure out what the sources are, and also what the actual mitzvah is. So, first of all, in the Torah, it says in the Torah that God visited Abraham after he had a bris milah, after he was circumcised. So the Torah says that Vayera elav Hashem be'elon mamre, that God appeared to Abraham in Elon Mamre, v'hu yoshev petach al moed b'chol hayom. That God visited Abraham at the opening of his tent, at the height of the heat of the day, which Rashi immediately tells us what's going on there. Why did he visit him? Levakir et achole, to visit the sick, because Abraham had just underwent the operation of a circumcision. So here he is sitting outside the tent, waiting for visitors to come, because Abraham was very much into the mitzvah of Gimel Chasadim, of acts of loving kindness, specifically Hachnasat Orchem, welcoming in the guests. God made it very hot that day. That's why it says Kechom Hayom, like the heat of the day. So nobody's coming. God takes the opportunity, as it were, to visit the sick and to teach us that we should visit the sick as a result of that, because we have to emulate God, which is what we learn in the Gemara of Sota. It says that Rav Chama, of the son of Chanina, said, why does the Torah say after Hashem you should go? He says, is it possible for a man to walk after the Shekhinah, after the divine presence of God? Behold, it says, surely it says in the Torah that Hashem is a fire that eats. So you can't go after God, as it were, but what it means is you go after the traits of God. Just as God dresses the naked, as it says, and God made clothes for the man and the woman, and he dressed them, also we have to clothe those who don't have clothes. Just as Hashem visited the sick, as it says, what we just said, that God appeared to Abraham in Elon and Mamre, so also we have to visit the sick. Just as God comforts the mourners, as it says, after the death of Abraham, he blessed Yitzchak, his son. So also we have to fulfill when we have mourners, we have to go and comfort them. And just finally, as the Gemara finishes off, just as Hashem buries the dead, as it says, he buried Moses in the valley, also we have to participate in the burial services, which is why at the Jewish funeral we actually bury the dead. It's not just enough to go to the eulogy, which is very nice and all that, but the real mitzvah is, well, you have two mitzvahs: halvayat hamet, accompanying the deceased to the final resting place, but also in the end putting the earth on the casket and actually burying the person. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is not just to lower it and let the backhoe come in and dump the dirt. You don't do that. You actually bury the person. As all from, we're trying to emulate God. Okay, but specifically in this case, we're looking at the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, like I said. So, another case that we also see in the Torah is when Moshe Rabbeinu's teacher, was talking to God about the punishment of Korach and the participants of the rebellion. So Moshe states that if God allows them to die like other people, it won't be clear that it's a punishment. Why? So the Gemara learns from here that the hint to the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, of visiting the sick, because it says, if you let them contract a disease, these people, the Korach and his congregation, if you let them contract a disease, then people will come to visit them in their sickbed, and people will say to them, it's not a result of God. Rather, people just get sick, and that's it. So Moshe didn't want that. He wanted everybody to understand that these people were being punished specifically because of rebellion. But from that, you learn the mitzvah of, and the power, by the way, of Bikur Cholim, which we'll come back to. But I'll just say it very quickly now. When we go to visit the sick, we are actually giving them what we call chizuk, reinforcement, so they can get better, because we keep telling them refuah shlema, you should have a complete recovery, so we're giving them brachas. That actually does help. And hospitals today will have pastoral boards, because they've also recognized that there's a spiritual component to healing. That I can give you, the old expression is, the operation was a success and the patient died. The operation worked very nicely, but still it wasn't enough to save the person. And here, when the person has, if he knows or she knows that people are praying for them, sometimes that gives them the extra oomph that they need to get over the edge. When Jethro, which is Moshe's father-in-law, came to set up the court system, he tells me he should set the court system up. So the Gemara infers from that when it says, "Vodata lahem et derech yelchu ba," that you should inform them in the way that they should go. So some people say yelchu ba, that they should go in with it, is referring to the mitzvah again of Bikur Cholim. So the Gemara says, wait a second, isn't this already included in the mitzvah of Gemir Chasadim, acts of loving kindness? After all, when I go to visit somebody who's sick, aren't I putting myself into danger? Really? This person's sick, they have a cold, and I go, there's a possibility that I could catch their cold. Or if or whatever else is going on, there's a possibility that I could get something from them. And so that's an act of loving kindness. On top of that, how do you define an act of loving kindness? When you do an act which you don't want to be paid back for. So if I'm visiting, when I visit somebody in the hospital, I certainly don't ever want them to be able to reciprocate. That's an act of loving kindness, as compared to just an act of kindness in which I give you something, and I expect that when I need it, you will give it to me. For example, you need a lawnmower. It's of course in Southman we have to keep our lawns mowed perfectly. So the lawnmower isn't working for you that moment. So you say, "Do you mind if I borrow your lawnmower?" Absolutely no problem. Borrow my lawnmower. We don't want the lawn association coming to us. Fine, it's done. Then when I need a rake, and I know you have a rake, the expectation is, if I ask you, that you should lend it to me. It's just a simple expectation. That's an act of kindness. Acts of loving kindness, again, are acts which I do not, under any circumstances, want you to be reciprocating the action. Because I don't want the action. I don't want to end up in the hospital. I don't want to end up dead, that you have to bury me. I don't want all these things. Okay? That's an act of loving kindness. Now, also what happens is, like I said, the Gemara says that when it comes to this, we already have the mitzvah of Gemir Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. So why do you need to tell me about Bikur Cholim? And the Gemara answers a very interesting way. It says that when one is referring to when visiting one who was born at the same time, and the Gemara seems to hold that that person will contract 1/60th of the disease of the patient. Who knows? You could get sick from it, and nevertheless, one must still perform the mitzvah of visiting the sick. So even though I may put myself into danger, the Gemara is telling us, still in all, you have to go. Now let's go a little further. Maimonides writes that the mitzvah Bikur Cholim is not an independent mitzvah, but is all part of Behavta Re'echa Kamocha, that you should love your friend like yourself, which means that one must perform acts of kindness in the same way you would expect others if you were on the receiving end. So again, God forbid somebody ends up in the hospital, they expect visitors. I know that even when I was home, and I have to give Rabbi Goodnick public thanks for this. He visited me 4 or 5 times when I was home, and it was very nice. Other people also came to visit me when I was home. And you know what? You're bored when you're home. You're bored when you're in a hospital. You really do want those visitors. And so people are taking time out of their busy schedule to come and visit you. There are times that and we do have visiting hours halachically, which we'll get into, God willing. But it's something that you have to, just as I really don't want it, I don't want to end up in a hospital or sick that people have to visit me. Still, no. Let's face it, when we are in that situation, we do want those visitors. You have a whole argument between the Rambam and the Ramban as to whether or not we should count it as a separate mitzvah, as one of the 613 mitzvot. And like I said, Rambam wants to say it's not. That's part of you shall love your neighbor like yourself. The Ramban wants to say that it is. Okay, fine. So you go back and forth with that argument. But so now, how does Maimonides understand the sources in the Gemara for Bikur Cholim? That's the question that's on the table. So he says, in terms of the mitzvah of emulating God, so Maimonides' focus seems to be on the traits of God. Like I said, just as God visited Abraham, so we also have to visit people who are sick. And the Gemara mentions that specific acts may be just expressions of someone who emulates God's traits. As such, there is no specific fulfillment of visiting the sick or any other related mitzvah vis-a-vis the mitzvah of emulating God, because it would all go under one rubric. The Gemara that discussed the rebellion of Korach doesn't seem to be focused on the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, but rather the fact that Bikur Cholim is effective. Like I just said, you have the medical evidence, besides the Torah of medical evidence, that when we visit people, it sometimes can make them feel better. And on top of that, people generally, it depends on when you see the person, will pray on behalf of that sick person. You have the women of this community and communities around the world who get together to say Tehillim, to pray on behalf of people who are sick. Right, Ruthie?
You looking at me?
There you go. I'm leading you because I saw you do that just yesterday. So, but that's a beautiful thing. People get together and they pray on other people's behalf. Or on every Shabbos when we say a Misha Berach, again praying for the people who are sick. Hopefully we update the list so we don't pray for people who are no longer in this world, which sometimes doesn't happen effectively. But and then it's too late anyway. But it's that also is something to think about. I remember I was once given Misha Berach, and the rabbi was asking for names. So somebody yelled out the name, and they used the father's name. And he said, no, we need the mother's name. She said, no, the person's dead. He said, this prayer won't help that person. That's good. So, I mean, she wanted for your side. But she didn't know what we're doing. Okay, so you have Rav Natali Berlin. He applies. I also have to recognize Rabbi Lindau for making the lunch. Thank you so much for making the lunch, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Gotta eat more people.
Right.
Come on, people.
If you don't eat it now, you're going to get it tomorrow for the next lecture.
Big crowd.
Right. So Rabbi Berlin, he applied the principle specifically to you shall love your neighbor like yourself. He notes that from the same verse we derive chayecha kodmen, that your life comes before anybody else's life. And as such, one could argue that there's almost never an obligation to perform kindness as it impinges upon one's personal needs. Therefore, when Maimonides states that you shall love your neighbor like yourself is determined by what you would expect from others, if you would expect others to put aside minor inconveniences or consequences for you, then you should do the same for others. But if it's going to impinge on you, on your health, so then you would not be obligated according to that. Okay? So you put those two ideas together. There's a general mitzvah of you shall love your neighbor like yourself, which includes all forms of chesed, like I said, all the kindnesses, but there are also specific categories of chesed, which have their own specific name and details to not only address the most effective way to perform the mitzvah, but also to encourage and guide people to perform these mitzvot in the light of personal challenges that come their way. So now what's the goal? Here I go. I'm going to visit the sick person who's sick. So what should be happening? So the Gemara states that one who visits the sick causes him to live, and the one who doesn't visit the sick causes him to die. the Gemara explains that this specifically refers to prayer. That praying for the sick will cause them to live longer, and not praying for them will speed their demise. Yeah.
I just want to say on a personal note, my mother had surgery tomorrow, it'll be 2 weeks ago, and before she had some preoperative tests, I asked some people to daven or recite Tehillim Psalms on her behalf, and at first she was kind of against it, and then she got the results, and they weren't as serious as she was afraid it was going to be.
Right.
And then she said to me, Ruthie, I really think that this is making a difference that people are davening for me.
There you go.
And then again, I had more people before she had the surgery. I asked more people, even people who I don't know, but we're in the same Facebook group or something. Please daven or say Tehillim on behalf of my mother. And thank God everything, so far it looks like it's going pretty smooth. And she said to me, Ruthie, please thank all the people who are davening for me, because I really think it made a difference.
There you go. There you go. Well, she has a Gemara to back her up. Okay?
She does.
The Gemara states that one should not visit a sick person. Now here's, by the way, this is halacha mandating visiting hours and giving reasons for it. We all know that we have visiting hours in the hospital from whatever time to whatever time. Well, there's actually a logic to this. Okay, so the Gemara states that one should not visit the sick during the first 3 hours when their illness is not as strong, because if you see the person who's looking healthy, you won't want to pray that much. Yeah. You'll say, oh, you're doing well, great, you'll be on 2 days, tremendous. And you really don't think that much about it. Or the other way, and you don't want to go during the last 3 hours of the day when their illness is very strong, because you see them falling down, basically dropping dead on the edge of death, and you say, well, it's too late to pray for that person. So either way, the halacha is saying if you go early in the morning when the person's spry and really up, it's no good, because you won't realize you have to pray. On the end of the day, it's too late again, because now you see the person is falling apart. So you say, oh, let the person rest in peace already. So you don't want to get involved in that. Okay, so Rabbeinu Nisim explains, like I said, that the reason for both of these is that the sick person benefits from the prayer of the visitor, and like I said, you won't pray as much one way or the other. So the Gemara states that one should not visit someone suffering from gastrointestinal disorders because of the embarrassment of the patient. So here we even have compassion if the person is running back and forth from the bathroom, so we don't want to, or they're just having to release gas or whatever the other pains that the person is going to go through. That's not the person you want to visit, because you're torturing that poor guy or that woman who doesn't want to be embarrassing himself, but when all the bodily things are going on. So the Gemara says you should not visit that person. When Maimonides presents the laws of visiting the sick, he is focusing on lifting the spirits of the patients and making sure the visit doesn't get in the way of treating the patient. So the Rambam writes that a visit should never put a burden on the patient. This is something that as visitors we really have to take into consideration. If you see, when again, within the hours that we can go to visit the sick, it doesn't mean that we should spend the entire day with that person. It means you go in, you say the niceties, you daven on the behalf of the person, and then, with a nice time, you leave. Same thing with a house of mourning. As the person's had to go through that. Also, you can only tell the story so many times, and then it becomes burdensome. And I remember somebody came into my house at 10 o'clock at night, because it was convenient, I guess. So at 10 o'clock at night, and we're all about to shut down because we need to go to sleep already. And they decide to come in and visit us. Oh, okay, so you're going to visit at that time? Make it a 10-minute visit. Don't keep showing pictures of the family. I don't want to go through that. But that's, again, when does the burden begin? So the Rambam is saying use your brains here. You don't want it to be a burden on the patient. You want the person to feel good from your visit. Also writes, like we learned in the halacha, that you should not visit in the first 3 hours, the last 3 hours of the day, because that's when they take care of the patient. By the way, if you go into the hospital today, since sometimes the tests are all over the place, you don't know when the person's going to be there. So what you simply should do is leave a card, or a note saying, I was here, so the person at least knows that you were there. That's very nice. Did you fulfill the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim? I don't know if you really have, at that point. I think you still have to see the person, but nonetheless, if you pray for the person, you're certainly helping that person out. Okay. Rambam writes that one should not visit the patients if the visit is going to be difficult for the patient. So, and he writes, such as if a person has a GI disorder, like we said, gastrointestinal, it's also possible for that Maimonides views the prayer element as part of lifting the spirits of the patient. It is clear that according to Maimonides, one should pray in front of the patient. If we were focused on the efficacy of the prayer, it should not make a difference if he is in the presence of the patient or not. Rather, the implication is that one should pray in front of the patient, show that the patient sees that people are praying for him, and his spirit will be lifted through that. Like Ruthie was saying, her mother knows that people are praying for her, so she feels good because of that. And as a result, when the tests come positive, or in that light, she feels, thank God, people like me. Okay, so again, it's lifting the spirit, and like I said from the beginning, that's a very important element, and recognized medically that there's a very important element for the patient. Okay. Moshe Sofa, he notes that there's another reason why people should pray in front of the patients. He notes that the Gemara says that if one is praying for the patient, there is no need to mention their name, as we find with Moshe Rabbeinu when he was talking about his sister, and his sister had contracted tsaras because she spoke lashon hara against her brother, and Aaron, also her brother and Moshe's brother, said, please pray on Miriam's behalf. So what does Hashem say? The shortest prayer in history. Kel na rafan Allah. Please God, heal her now. Period. Not normally when I always say Misha Berachah prayer, we use the person's name. So we'd say Rafat na le plonit or ploni ben ploni. Okay? And here, we're not saying that. Here, the shortest prayer, that's when, if somebody's in front of you and they pray for you, they don't need to say your name. That's why Moshe said, Kel na rafan Allah. God, please God, heal her now. Okay. However, Rabbi Avram Gambina, who was, I think, the Taz, if I remember correctly, writes that this only applies in the presence of the patient. When one is not in the presence of the patient, one should mention his name. Rav Sofer notes that Kabbalistically, mentioning someone's name in a prayer invokes a certain degree of judgment. Therefore, if one prays in the presence of the patient, it is the best form of prayer because there is no need to mention his name. What's the judgment, by the way? Can anybody tell me what the judgment is? No? I'll tell you. It's an amazing thing. When I ask Hashem to heal a specific person, then what I've done, and I don't include that person in all the other sick people, what I've done is said, I brought this person, as it were, to God's attention. So God now looks at this person in a judgment form. Does this person deserve to be healed? What's the merit? What's the demerit? What has he done? What has she done? And so on. And so it's an interesting court case by saying the name. As compared to Kel na rafan Allah, please God heal her now, it doesn't do that. There's no law case that enters in. Please heal them. Which is why in our prayers we never just say the particular person. We say a particular person amongst all the other sick. If you're going to look at this one, look at everybody. That's what we're basically saying to God. Don't just pick this one out. Now, worrying about the mental health of the patient. In addition to trying to lift the spirits of the patient, we must also make sure not to cause the patient emotional suffering, which may cause the condition to deteriorate. So, one example is you get the person to say vidoy. We have vidoy is confession. So here, the person's on their deathbed, and you say to the person, oh, you better confess your sins to God. Well, people say, and people would think, if I confess my sins, it means I'm dying, I have no chance, and they get really depressed. So the Gemara states that when you tell the person to say vidoy, you have to go through a whole speech, and the speech basically goes like this. You should say vidoy, and don't worry. Many people have said this and lived to talk about it. It's just saying that if I die, or this sickness should be an atonement for what I've done. That's all you're doing. So it's nothing wrong with saying vidoy. And if you don't say vidoy and you die, then your death will not necessarily be used as atonement. Why not gain benefit? Wow. Really, that's what's going on. You're betting the odds. See, and the truth is, again, I use my mother for this. When she was told she had cancer, and I came home, she had from the time I came home to the time she died was a month, basically. And I said to my mother, Ma, I gave her the speech. I said, Ma, you should say vidoy. And she said in English, so she knew what she was saying, and she liked the prayer. And she would say it morning and noon, morning and at night, before she would wake up, before she go to sleep, and when she woke up. She would say it those 2 times, and she wanted to say it, and she said she got great comfort from it. Now the matter of the fact is, she said it for a month, which means just because I say vidoy doesn't mean I'm going to die. And she understood that, and she understood what the prayer was, what the statement was, and so she was encouraged by that. She actually had some ups and downs. She had some ups and some downs. But it's that's what you have to tell the person. Just because you're saying it, it's no good. If you know the person, on the other hand, is going to take it in a very bad manner, it's not the thing you bring up. You just don't bring that up. Okay, so you have to be sensitive about it, and you have to use your sensibility. Okay, that's what the Ramban notes. He says you have to note the sensitivity, and if it's going to cause him to deteriorate, you don't tell him that he should do it. The Rabbi Danzig notes that in some communities there is a practice that after 3 days, a member of the Bikur Cholem Chevra, the Society of Visiting the Sick, goes to the patient and tells them that there is tradition that all Cholem write a will, all sick people write a will and recite vidoy on the 3rd day of the illness. This prevents the patient from worrying about something specific about his predicament. Rabbi Danzig recommended that such a practice be adopted. So here, can you imagine that? You're three days sick, and somebody comes to you, the society comes to you and says, you know what, you really should make your will, and you should really confess to the Lord. I don't know if that would make me feel good, but that's what he was saying. And he was saying, make it a low plug, make it a no distinction. Once you're sick 3 days, make sure everything is in order. Now, this is not a flu we're talking about. We're talking about a person who is incapacitated for 3 days. In other words, if you had the operation like I had the operation and I was just in my house, thank God I was far from incapacitated. I was walking all over in my house. I just couldn't put on the pants. That's all, so I can't leave the house. It's as simple as that. But I'm still healthy. I'm still doing what I have to do. Otherwise, it let you out of the hospital. But if somebody's in the hospital and they're incapacitated and they can't get out, so at that point, that's who he's talking. That's the customer he's talking about, the patient. So then you have to, that's when he would suggest you do that. Okay, and finally, the Chafetz Chaim, Rav Yisrael Meir Kagan, notes that an important component of Bikur Cholim is making sure that the patient's financial needs are taken care of. Can he afford the medicine? Can he afford the special diet that he must now follow? He points out that people generally prefer to visit friends and important people and ignore the poor people, and this is, of course, a great sin. So if hey, how you doing? So if he was looking, and it's interesting that Rabbi Kagan died in 1933. He had yet to hit the medical profession that we have today. My operation, I was in the and you have to think about this. I went into the hospital, checked in, check-in time 12. I left at 4. That's 4 hours. The operation cost $12,000. Actually, really 13, because they went 12,999. Just they have to just pull that there. $13,000 for 4 hours. I mean, what are you building here? But that's what it was. So Rev Kagan is saying to people, maybe they don't have the money, maybe they don't have, so you have to worry about that, and you have to make sure that they're taken care of, because you don't want to limit their health care because of financial aid, financial debt. So he was saying that's what we have to worry about. That's part of the mitzvah, he said, or Bikur Cholim. Part of the mitzvah. Now, thank God in America, before Obamacare, we also had, what was it called? Where you could go to the hospital if you didn't have the money, and you fill out the form, and they would also exempt you. I forget what they called that program.
Medicaid.
What was it?
Medicaid?
No, it wasn't Medicaid. You didn't have to be on Medicaid. It was if the person didn't have insurance, a young person or whatever didn't have insurance, you would just fill out the form in the a waiver, I guess they would call it, and they just the loss. They put it to somebody else. So the insurance companies were raised. I don't know what happened, but they cannot refuse service due to financial problems. It says in every hospital we cannot be denied service for that.
That's the law.
That's the law.
Yeah.
Right. So thank God in America we have that where the person can be denied, and that's so they were following Rav Yishmael Meir Kagan's advice. We have to worry about the medical needs. Now here we go. Bikur Cholim, can you do it over a telephone or a video? We have Baruch Hashem. We have Skype. So can I do it over Skype? Okay. So you have two things going on. Rabbi Yeshua Falk, he infers from the Gemara's comment of Yelchu Bazeh Bikur Cholim that there's a specific, that name you have to go in it, you have to walk in it, and that's the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. So he says there is a specific commandment to walk to the patient and visit him. This comment has been used to argue that you cannot do it by the telephone. On the other, and then you have Reb Moshe Feinstein. He said that there are certain advantages to visiting the patient in person that cannot be accomplished through a phone call. However, if a personal visit is not possible, there is certainly a fulfillment of mitzvah by phoning the patient. Again, what's the purpose? If the purpose is to make you feel good, so I pick up my telephone if I can't get there. If I can get there, the best thing is to go and visit, no question. But if I cannot get there, like when my mother found out what was going on, I couldn't just hop on a plane, or to use Star Trekian terms, go on the transporter machine and get transported. It's a 12-hour drive, or, well, it's a 12-hour flight, depending on how bad the planes are screwed up. But you can't get from here to there. Just can't do it without all these exchanges. But that was, so when I found out my mother was sick, what do? I call the telephone. If I would have had Skype, and the kids could have seen her, and she would have got chizuk from that. She would have felt great for that too. She would have missed us not being there, fine. But it's something. So Rabbi Feinstein is saying, in the best of all worlds, go and visit. No problem. But if I don't, pick up the telephone. That's also fulfilling the mitzvah, according to him, of Bikur Cholim. Now what happens when a person has a contagious disease? So the Ramah discusses a rental dispute where the landlord was concerned that the tenant was leaving a contagious disease on the property. The Ramah writes that we cannot just assume that the particular disease is contagious, because if we did, we would eliminate the mitzvah of visiting the sick. The halacha only recognizes saras as a contagious, in other words, the leprosy, if you will, of a contagious disease, as a contagious disease, and we don't have to be concerned about other contagious diseases. So unless we know for sure it's contagious, it's not one of the things that should stop us. Rav Chaim, according to Ramah, Rav Chaim Medini notes that Acharonim disagree and maintain there is no obligation to visit people with contagious diseases. In these situations, special people should be hired to help them. So now what do you have? The Ebola? That's the virus, okay? So if you know somebody who has the Ebola virus, unlike President Obama, in his speech to the Rabbi Obama, in his speech to the nation when we had the Ebola crisis, so he got on the news and he got on the stations and he said, "It's not contagious. We don't have to worry. It's not an airborne thing. It's only gets transferred. I forget how through bodily fluids. And to prove that, when he went into the hospitals, he hugged all the people taking care of the Ebola patient. And I was thinking to myself, President Obama, I'm sure you did what you said. You're insane. I would not go and hug the person who's taking care of somebody who's contagious. That's ridiculous. I understand that it shouldn't transfer, but what if we're wrong? Why put your life into danger? Now, thank God, he didn't die. But it's not the smartest thing to do. Okay, so that's why Reb Chaim Medini says you have special people who will take the necessary precautions. Take care of them. Let them go and visit. You don't have to do it. If it's contagious, stay away. When it comes to the in 1750, he says, when you had a Bika Cholim manual, the group that would visit is instructed not to visit people with certain contagious diseases. So we see that it wasn't just one opinion, but it was actually followed. Then finally you have Reb Shmuel Levi Vosner, who writes that one should not visit those with contagious disease, and Ramaz Teshuvah, the Ramaz statement is difficult. So for the most part, everybody's coming down against the Ramah, who normally we would rule by, okay, and saying, if they're contagious, take the telephone. Take the telephone, do Skype. But don't go there, because you're putting yourself into danger. Again, if it's a regular cold, we're not talking about that. Either I have a constitution or I don't. But if somebody has the chicken pox and you haven't got your shots for whatever reason, you don't put yourself into that situation and say, God will protect me because I'm in the mitzvah. Because that's what people do. They like to believe that if I'm involved in a mitzvah, because we say a shalich mitzvah can't be bothered, it can't be touched. If a person who's doing a mitzvah, so God will protect him. Well, God does not protect fools. If I'm doing a mitzvah, like I have to bring something to somebody else, that's fine. I can exempt myself from certain things. But if I'm going to put myself into a situation, relying upon this mitzvah to protect me, Hashem says, don't do me any favors. You have plenty of people who are saying you shouldn't be doing it, so don't put yourself into a danger. I can only protect you if the commandment is there that you must follow. That's when I'm going to protect you. Okay? Otherwise not. Okay? By the way, this also becomes, and think about a couple of years ago when we had the bomb threats. So when you put when I would go on a plane sometimes in the old days, I would catch the plane early in the morning, so before sunrise. So by the time I would get to my destination, it would be late. So what does every good Jew do? We put out the film on the plane, okay? And we daven on the plane. Well, when after 9/11, when everybody was looking like, oh, what is he doing? Yeah. So at that point, some people decided they're still going to put the film on the plane, which means turn the plane around, get the guy off, and that's it. Instead of just praying without tefillin. And then when you get to your destination, you can put the film on all day. Put it on. That's all. Or when you get to the airport, put it on. No problem. But you don't do it on the plane, where people are already afraid. Now I think it's already different. Now I think people are back to normal self. But in those days, you have to use your brains. And so I have to know what the mitzvah is, what's the purpose of the mitzvah, and either I put it on before, put it on after, but not in the middle and force a plane to be turned around and claim religious freedom. I was against that when I saw that. It was totally ridiculous. You can still daven properly without tefillin, and then you put it on later. No big deal. Or what I do when I'm in the airport, if I'm stuck in the airport, I go to the front to the what do you call it, the office where you can talk to, where you talk to the people, whatever that's called, the counter. The counter. And I say, customer service. And I say to them, excuse me, I'm a religious Jew. I need to pray. Is there any place that I can go that I can be, I won't disturb people, and that they won't disturb me? And they're very nice about it. You don't say, here, use this place, and they put you into a little corner. That's it. You can daven. Not a problem. So if you're nice to people, explain what you want to do, 99% of the time, They'll work with you. And that's all part of this process of you don't put yourself into the danger. You don't rely upon the miracle of doing a mitzvah. Now, Flug wants to just give a defense of the Ramah, because like I said, he said when you have a contagious disease, you shouldn't be worried about it unless it's saras. He says it's possible that he's not ruling that one should visit sick people with contagious diseases. Rather, he's saying that we should not make assumptions that diseases are contagious unless we can verify that they are. If we make assumptions, then we can claim there's a doubt of possibly something going to happen in any situation of Bika Cholim. So, if I know it's clearly one thing, if I know the person is contagious, Flug is arguing that Ramah would say you shouldn't visit. On the other hand, if I don't know he's contagious, so then I should be able to visit. And as the Gemara states, regarding the Ben Gilo, the person who's the same age, we assume that a little bit of risk of contracting a disease when visiting the sick. We assume that. That doesn't mean that we should put ourselves into a danger or even a doubtful danger, but we shouldn't also be overly concerned. Finally, we have learned the laws from God's visit to Abraham. It says, the Gemara states that even an important person should visit someone not as important. How do you learn that? God himself, as it were, visited Abraham. Yeah?
So you said that you shouldn't visit someone who's contagious.
If you know.
Unless it's a situation where it's like a common cold where it's not so dangerous.
Yeah.
But, I mean, should you visit someone who has a common cold? Like, what is the cutoff?
If the person is going to want to see you with a common cold, good luck to you. Normally a common cold, you just want to sleep.
Yeah.
But if a person has, let's say the person is
the flu.
Well, a flu.
That's contagious.
That's contagious. So then, why put yourself in such a situation?
That's
And that was Daniel. Basically, it is if it's contagious, if you can contract, the odds are good that you're going to contract it yourself by going, don't go. Make a telephone call.
Keep your distance. Don't touch.
Oh, that's also so if you can do that too. The ones who really head into the problems are people like me, who are told you have to visit somebody in the hospital.
Oh. Huh.
So today, and it's not just today, it's for many years already, if you walk, most of the time, if you're walking through the halls of the hospital, you have these Purell that you can, like that, and sanitizers that kill all the germs. And every time you see a doctor walk out of the room, he'll go like this. And you know what? I got into the habit too. When I was 15 people, because they want to shake your hand, they want to do everything. I don't know what was going on. I mean, anybody I was visiting, I doubt was contagious anyway. But you just get into that habit of wiping your hands because you don't know if what you have may transfer to them too.
Yeah, when I worked at the hospital, I had a specific Purell dispenser that I hit every time on the way to lunch.
That's all. Right. And that's what you have to do. So you want to get rid of that stuff. Like I said, you have to remember that when I'm healthy and I'm walking into somebody, I don't know what I've touched. And so now that person wants to touch my hand or how it's going to transfer. That's also a bad thing. So I have to wipe my hands. That's why the doctor will do it before he touches you, or put gloves on. He or she, I'm being very prejudiced to say he or she will put gloves on before they touch you, whatever the case is going to be. Or they'll put the Purell on again before even dealing with you, because they don't know what they've brought over. So you have to be very careful. But like I said, with the line is usually common sense. If the person wants a visitor, so then you make it a short visit. And I would even say more, since you're not the rabbi, don't shake their hands. Certainly don't kiss them.
No.
That's the worst way to get everything, okay? Because I know that your aunts, this and that, they all want to kiss. No, okay. It's not the time. When you're healthy, I'll kiss you, honey. But not right now. But you have to also, that's like I said, it's a matter of common sense at that point. If you know they're contagious, again, you have a lot of people saying you should not go. You're putting yourself into danger. Yeah, Ruthie.
Well, this is very old schoolish, and I don't know if our younger folk here know about this, but what about sending somebody a get well card if somebody is contagious? And you think that it'll cheer up that person? Could that be considered as almost the same thing or the same merit?
Well, again, you should call and send. I would do both because The card is very nice, and it makes people feel good. When I got my card from the hospital saying "Get well," by the way, we're the ones who took care of you, and if you'd like, you can send us some money. And I was like, wow, I'm already paying $12,000. You want more? Okay, but it's it's very nice to send the cards. When you get it, it does bring a smile to your face. Thank you, Jim. When Jim sent it to me, it was very nice.
That was nice.
No, it's very nice, and you feel good about it. Hey, somebody thought about me, and they spent 25 cents on the stamp. No.
More than that, Jim, tell him. 33.
There you go. Okay, so you have Rabbi Ashkenazi notes that we can learn from Hashem's visit to God. Like I said, God was concerned about his own stature when visiting a lowly human being. And so you also have Rabbi Chaim Azuli who notes that we can learn some of the other laws from Bikuch Cholim from the visit. One, that we should visit on the third day. That's something too. If a person, Daniel, this goes more to your question too. If the person is still sick by the third day, that's when we start. We're not talking, by the way, that's for a normal person. If it's a close family relative, or if you're the rabbi, get there ASAP. Otherwise, you're considered no good. But if it's close family, then you can visit from the first day, and you should. You should make sure everything's good. But if it's just a regular friend, and you know what you are, so then the third day is the first day you should be thinking about going. Because otherwise, the person is not really up to receiving visitors. So you wait for the third, and also the third day is when the pain is sometimes, the third day of the operation is actually the worst pain. So you don't, if you go the fourth day, that may be better for the customer, or your patron you're visiting, but you won't pray as hard. So again, you have to take that in consideration too. So another thing that we should visit in the middle of the day, like I said, you don't want to go the first 3 or the last 3 hours of the day, and we don't want to visit somebody who's going to be embarrassed by the visit. Again, if they have gastrointestinal problems or other problems like that, you don't want to visit. Any other questions? Then that's the mitzvah of Bikuch Cholim.